The calendar flipped to March, and that means it's Izzo time.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Monday, happy March, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the daily national college hoops show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Schade, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Want to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Also remind you all that you can listen to this show ad-free on Amazon Music, and that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Well, Isaac, it's March, and we had an incredible Saturday slate of games, and our good friend Leaf Tulane hosting the Locked On College Basketball Game Night episode. He covered a ton of these games on Saturday night. Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, Bama, covered the Big 12 games between Texas Tech and Kansas, and then Iowa State taking it to Arizona. Also covered some other bubbly games, some other SEC games. Duke, Florida State, got all of that covered on Saturday's show. If you haven't seen it, it's in your feed. Wherever you're listening to this, you can find it there. Every Saturday night, Leaf hosts that game night show. We also mentioned last week, at the end of the week, the clinching scenarios for this weekend, and we saw St. John's is now the outright winner in the Big East. Houston, outright winner in the Big 12. Auburn, outright winner in one of the greatest conferences we've ever seen, the SEC this year. The ACC is still in the same spot. Duke, one-game lead over Clemson and Louisville with 2 games to go. So those are your clinching scenarios in the 4 of the 5 major conferences. But we're going to talk now about that final conference, the Big Ten, because we saw some very fun games on Sunday that give us a little bit clearer picture of how the Big Ten is shaking up. We saw Michigan State, as we said in the cold open, it's March, so now nobody wants to face the Spartans and Tom Izzo. They take it to Wisconsin at home, win this one 71-62. Meanwhile, Illinois, a little gift for the Spartan faithful as they take down Michigan in a major way. Very, very big time win for a finally healthy Illinois team against Dusty May and the Wolverines. So, Isaac, we're going to talk about a little bit about each of these games, but also just want to talk about what this means for the Big Ten standings as we get closer and closer to the end of the regular season.
Woo, Andy, it is March. I'm so glad you said that. I'm like giddy. I just woke up on Saturday and the air smelled different. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, baby, it's going. And what a great way. I know you mentioned those games from Saturday, man. Jemai Mashak, I feel like he just ushered in March for all of us. And good grief, we've had a couple of those this week. Man, just so fun.
I think they said with that was like the first buzzer beater between 2 top 10 teams in since the Villanova Final Four game. I think it was some crazy stat of how rare it is to have a buzzer beater between 2 teams ranked out. Just incredible stuff.
I don't know what game you're referencing, Andy. I don't know that Villanova's ever hit a buzzer beater.
Well, that's never happened.
Important game. No, man, it's so great. And it's funny because here's a segue back. The other buzzer beater that we had like that last week was Trey Holloman, which brings us back to Michigan State. And my goodness, Andy, I really was anticipating this game. We had 2 top 11 teams with basically, if Wisconsin wins this game, it makes it like a trio event for the Big Ten championship. And so big on Sparty for pulling this out. Wisconsin led at the half by 2 points. They were obviously, we got to mention, they were playing without Max Klesmit in this game, a lower body injury. And Andy, this was a high level back and forth game. Yeah. I know we didn't get much Jase Richardson in the first half, right? He played 5 minutes with foul trouble, but I just continue, every time I watch Michigan State play right now, I'm like, this team's ceiling has gone up 3, 4, 5 spots on whatever your ceiling meter. We need to develop a ceiling meter. I don't even know how you do that, but we need something like that. Anyway, because of Jase Richardson's coming along and everything he does. And it's not even like he went crazy scoring in this game, but he just did a little bit of everything. Finished with 11 points, 3 of 6 from 3, 4 of 9 from the field, 5 boards, 6 assists, and just 1 turnover. When one of your secondary playmakers is distributing like that, Andy, I mean, it's like good luck to everybody else. I mean, East Lansing was going off. It's Izzo time. I don't know what else you want from me.
Yeah, Michigan State is just the kind of team that they'll find a way to beat you regardless. Like in Wisconsin, like you said, they were a little undermanned without Klesmit. And I think if you were to tell anybody, Klesmit doesn't play, John Tanji goes 3 of 13 from the field. As a team, they shoot 5 of 32 from 3. Wisconsin's probably going to lose most games where those things happen. I think that's a fair statement. And I for the Badgers, that Oregon loss where they had that 17-point lead is really hurting them because this in a vacuum, a 9-point loss on the road at Michigan State without one of your better players is not that terrible of a loss. It's really not. I doubt it hurt them much from the metrics. It shouldn't have. But to have lost that Oregon game just puts them now kind of further out of the picture in this conference, when in reality, they might have been right in it still, even after losing this game, if they hadn't had that just complete collapse against the Ducks. But yeah, shout out to Tom Izzo and Michigan State for finding a way. Jase Richardson continues to impress, like you said. Jaden Akins had a great game, 19 and 8 for him. Jackson Kohler, great game for him, 16 boards. Again, for Wisconsin, they're already a team that doesn't have a ton of size, and without Klesmit in the mix, it was easy for Michigan State to kind of dominate down around the paint and on the glass, and that's what ended up happening in this one. But tough for Wisconsin. They're a good team. They lost a tough game here, but Michigan State is not a team anybody wants to face in March.
No, and Andy, to your point, had Wisconsin won that game against Oregon, they would be tied with Michigan at 15 and not 15 and 5, whatever. Yeah, right now. And so it's just like, ooh,
yeah,
no. 13 and 5, they would be a game back. I apologize.
But anyway, over Purdue and Maryland, though.
Yes, exactly. Oh man, right there in the mix and would not be tied. Yes, exactly. And Andy, there were a couple stats that really stuck out to me in this game, like big team stats. Sparty led fast break points 20-8. I thought they were real advantageous in this. Like, weren't looking to run, but a lot of opportunities presented themselves, and they really took advantage of it. I thought the other thing was, man, they're just I'm going to avoid using that cliche phrase about sharing a certain kitchen ingredient, but man, they shared the ball well. 20 assists on 28 field goals, Andy. That kind of team movement and anybody like best shot wins kind of mentality is really good. Andy, I think we probably should go on to the second game here where it was funny. You and I had planned to start prepping our notes and get in together a little bit later. And I texted you because this game got what I think I texted you that it got a little bit blowouty. And good night, man. Illinois winds up winning this game at Michigan, right? Both Michigan schools were at home. Illinois wins at Michigan by 20. These Illini, these poor guys have been so up and down. And Andy, I think honestly, so much of it can be attributed to the illness that has run rampant within their team. Coach Underwood has talked about how hard it's been for these guys to get back into playing shape. And so, look, Michigan, we talked about it on Friday. Are these close wins going to catch up with them and either one of those flip into a close loss or something like this happened and something like this just happened?
Yeah, it's Illinois when fully healthy. This is one of the 3-4 best teams in this conference. I don't think there's honestly a ton of debate about that. You got the Michigan schools, you got
it's
Wisconsin.
Probably these 4 schools.
Yeah, right.
And
honestly,
Maryland,
it's probably these
maybe.
4 schools with Purdue in that mix. Maybe Maryland in that mix too. I don't want to disrespect them, but Illinois hasn't played at that level because they haven't been healthy for large chunks of the season. I think for a team that's so young, like this is kind of when you expect a team with so many freshmen and new faces on that roster to really be peaking, like mid-February, late February into early March. And this team had some great moments early in the year, but because of all of the injuries, they very rarely had everybody healthy and available. So they just never really got the chance. Like teams peak because of the amount of time they've spent together, and this team just didn't really get a chance to do that. And if they do now, like this is a team where, I mean, I'm not sure where they'll exactly finish in the Big Ten, but the odds of them winning the conference tournament are going to be much higher than where they end up seated in my mind, because I think that they're incredibly dangerous. And going out and getting a win in Ann Arbor against a very, very good Michigan team, I mean, that kind of helps prove the point. I mean, they didn't just go squeak out a win. They went out and dominated from opening tip all the way through this game. Just really, really impressive stuff from the Illini, and puts Michigan in a spot where, Michigan State already had the tiebreaker over Michigan. So even if they were both 15-3, Michigan State would be kind of in the driver's seat to finish first, but these two teams are going to play each other. on Saturday. And so that would have given Michigan an opportunity to take over first place in that position. And now they're a game back. There's still a chance. They got Maryland on Wednesday for Michigan, and then they, of course, got the game at Michigan State. For Michigan State, they're at Iowa on Thursday. That's a game they need to win, and they can't look ahead and start getting too prepared for that game on Saturday against the Wolverines. But it's going to be really fun to see, or on Sunday, excuse me. It's going to be really fun to see how these two teams look leading up to that big-time game on Sunday, because that's going to be a blast.
Andy, and that's the thing. When I look at these two situations, Michigan State has all the advantage here. They're at home. Mm-hmm. They hold the tiebreaker right now. Mm-hmm. They get to play Iowa, whereas I think Maryland at home and then at Sparty is a much more difficult situation for Michigan to get into, and let me just share really quick. Illinois, they've only got one regular season game left. They've already played 19. They host Purdue on Friday night, Andy. That's a really intriguing game to wrap the season. Remember, Purdue finally got a win this weekend after that 4-game losing streak, but that could easily be another loss right there at the end. And then as for Wisconsin, they got two very winnable games to wrap things up at Minnesota on Wednesday and then hosting Penn State on Saturday. So we'll see, Andy, what happens with all of that. Now, Andy, it's time to get bubbly, my friend. Trio of SEC bubble teams took tough losses on Saturday, but bad news for them, but good news for fans of the other bubble squads. We'll talk bubble winners and losers coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Roy. Hey, attention, Locked On College basketball fans. The future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations, they often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. But now with Roy, man, you get to be part of the change and support college basketball athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you, the fan, to choose the player you want to support, decide how much you want to contribute, and then receive exclusive content from the athletes you back. And the best part, if your player decides to transfer, no worries. You get your money back. It's a great risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving you, the fans, control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. So download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing college basketball athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Andy, throughout the weekend, we typically have a whole host of great games, but the bubble situation was all fixated on Saturday. Wasn't really anything on Friday, wasn't really anything yesterday on Sunday, but boy, did we have a bubblicious slate throughout the day Saturday, starting at noon Eastern and all the way until my eyes closed themselves, even as I needed some clothespins or something to keep them going. Andy, we got a little bit of a host of some winners and losers here. Let's start with the teams that helped themselves out on Saturday. What you got?
Yeah, Xavier, I think, was probably the biggest winner here. They got a nice win over Creighton, and we kind of knew this was one of the better opportunities presenting itself to a bubble team. I think that's always a big part of the equation. Is in a lot of cases, bubble teams really just have games where they can't lose. Like North Carolina, for example, is a bubble winner because they did not lose to Miami, but it's not like the win against Miami dramatically altered North Carolina's resume. Whereas for Xavier, this is a nice win over Creighton. Now it's a quad 2 win, unfortunately, so they still only have the one quad 1 win, and that is a pretty dangerous number when you're trying to be in at-large consideration to only have that one quad 1 win. But for Xavier, really nice win over Creighton. Vandy is a team that I think is already pretty safely in the field. I don't know that they were as much in that bubble conversation, but if you wanted to cement yourself in the field of 68 without having to even worry about it for the rest of the season, go out and get a win over Mizzou, and that is what they were able to do. Shout out Mark Byington and Vandy. Dennis Gates and Mizzou forgot that you're supposed to foul when you're up 3. They'd been able to do that. They might have been able to pull off the W here. Obviously, Mizzou in a very comfortable spot themselves, but Vandy did some really great work here to secure their spot. Boise State, similar to the North Carolina situation, Boise State just could not screw around with Fresno State, the worst team in the Mountain West. And honestly, they did. They screwed around with them for a long time, nearly had what would have been a catastrophic loss for Leon Rice and the Broncos, but they pulled it out. A win is a win. They stay in a comfortable spot because they did not lose. North Carolina, far less mystery. They went out and took care of business against a very bad Miami team. Carolina have been playing some good basketball as of late, coming into that big-time matchup to close out the regular season against Duke. And then we talked about this with Georgia playing Texas. It was a double bubble game. Whichever team won that game was going to be in a far more comfortable position on the correct side of the bubble. Georgia takes care of business. Really nice win for them. Really ugly performance for Texas in this one. They are on our loser list, of course, but Georgia, nice job by Mike White, Asa Newell, and company to get a W here.
Andy, one of the things, talking about Boise State is that some of their metrics are looking pretty strong, but one of their issues right now is they've got 3 different losses outside of quad 1. They've got a quad 2 loss and 2 different quad 3 losses, BC and Wazoo on a neutral floor. And so Boise State really trying to overcome that right now. Andy, I did a good bit of looking around on Sunday. You and I were talking about this before we started recording at various resumes and data points. And one of the hard things for the selection committee is, man, the bubble is full of undeserving teams, as it always is. Yeah. And it's like, what are the things that are really going to sell it? Is it being high? We've added in some new predictive metrics to the team sheets this year. Are they going to value that? Are they going to value not losing outside of quad 1? Are they going to value more non-con strength? It's just so hard to know. And I feel like, if I compare Boise State and Xavier, right, it's like, well, Boise State has more quad 1 wins, but Xavier doesn't have any losses outside of quad 2, while Boise State has 2. It's just all these little nitpicky things, man. I'm really intrigued what the selection committee chair, A.D. Bubba Cunningham from North Carolina, and his committee are going to do. It's going to be very interesting. Andy, a quick honorable mention in the winners side of things, Colorado State is just squeaking into this conversation, right? We want to just mention that and say it. And by the way, they thrashed Utah State 93-66 on Saturday. Still a little bit outsidey looking in, but I think they do deserve a look, Andy. Like, let's not look at them with binoculars. Maybe we just get a little looking glass or something. By the way, Utah State, I feel like they're comfortable, Andy, but they can't be messing around down the stretch here. Got a very winnable game to close things out. And then you got a couple other schools that, as you said, with Vandy, not really all that bubbly, but Baylor had slipped back onto the bubble a little bit. They got to win this weekend, and so we had some others like that as well. Let's flip things where we had a couple egg layers, Andy, I'm calling them, on the loser side. You already mentioned Texas just getting blitzed at home by Georgia. Not good. They've got 3 straight losses now. They've lost 6 of 7 and 7 of their last 9, Andy. It's really kind of tumbling for Rodney Terry's team. Speaking of which, you and I were pretty convinced after that first year that Rodney Terry finished out that he was good to go. Andy, I'm concerned. I'll say that right now. Arkansas had a massive bubble. They were in our bubble winners category last year, or last week, excuse me. And then they go out and do this weekend. I mean, losing at South Carolina was a big fat ouch. And Andy, they didn't just lose at South Carolina. This was an embarrassing loss. 14 points at the half. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, something like that. It was atrocious. Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's all egg layer. The thing that we've got to do, though, folks, is not be completely reactionary. This time of year, it's so easy to think, oh, this massive loss at South Carolina. Well, it's a quad 2 loss, Andy, right? And so it's just a data point on their entire season. So that's what we got to be able to zoom out and do in that way. Oklahoma. Andy, they're in an interesting spot right now because they've had back-to-back losses this week, but it's by 4 combined points. They lost at home to Kentucky with Otega Owe going off and that flip over his head as the game winner. Like, they are that shot away from not winning that game. And then this loss this weekend is tough again. Like, I thought they were in good shape at Ole Miss. They had come back and just things went the wrong way at the very last second there. And so when you come into those 2 games already 4-10 in the SEC, there's no room for moral victories, Andy. And the problem for the Sooners is not only is that now 2 straight, but they've lost 7 of 8 and 8 of 10.
Yeah. Oklahoma
different. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, Oklahoma's, it's somewhat similar to what happened last year, their final year in the Big 12, where they had such a strong non-conference and just did not do well enough in the conference. And this year, while that narrative is kind of similar, the fact that the SEC is so good is kind of helping Oklahoma, a team that has, more quad one wins than probably anybody else on the bubble, or at least among the most of any bubble team at this point. They had a strong non-conference. I mean, they beat Arizona and Louisville, were fantastic wins for them. They beat Michigan in December. Like, this team has really good wins, but their conference resume is just not great. I mean, they only have 4 wins in the conference, and their wins are home against South Carolina, road against Arkansas, fine, home against Vanderbilt, fine, home against Mississippi State. Like, okay, those are decent wins, but nothing great. And they only have 2 games left, and it's home against Missouri, which would be a nice win if they were to get that, but a potentially bad loss is a home game. And then they're at Texas, another bubble team, kind of a little bit farther off the bubble at this point for Texas, but it's for Oklahoma. And I don't think you can lose either of those games. I think you have to win both of them. And I think if you, even if you win both of them, you're still 6-12 in the conference. You still don't really have any great conference wins. Like, they're still going to be in kind of a tricky spot. So very interested to see what happens with Porter Moser's team. Yeah.
Cause they're not, it's like they were undefeated in non-con, but their strength of schedule was abysmal, Andy. It's like the whole Big 12 thing from last year. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Other bubble teams that did not have good weekends. Nebraska lost at home to Minnesota. That's 3 straight losses for Fred Hoiberg's team. They've now lost 4 of their last 5 games. It's hard to. Again, you want to look at the whole season. You don't want to just look, kind of narrowly focused. I know that the committee in the past has really put a strong emphasis on like Final 10. And I know they've kind of gone away from doing that, but I do wonder if, it's human nature to look at how a team's doing towards the end of the year. It's just recency bias, and Nebraska hasn't looked great. And so they're in a tough spot right now. And then SMU, a team that has kind of just been floating around this conversation by virtue of just not really having a great resume, but having a resume that's good enough. And they don't really have a lot of quad one wins, but they don't have a lot of bad losses, but they go out and lose at Stanford. And we kind of wondered if this might happen. Those road trips out west are tough. Obviously, SMU is going about half as far as most of the rest of the teams in the ACC, but it's still tough to go out there, and Stanford gets a W there. And I think that's a bad enough loss for SMU that I think it's going to take some serious work in the ACC tournament to get them back on the correct side of the bubble here. And then an honorable mention in the bad category, San Francisco, a team that wasn't really on the bubble, but it was like, hey, if you beat Gonzaga on Saturday, you might then be on the bubble. And they did not. They got beat by 20 by the Zags, who have now cemented their spot in the NCAA tournament by beating both Santa Clara and San Francisco this past week. I think Gonzaga not only put themselves firmly in the field, but I think they made sure both those teams are not going to be in the field after beating them this past week.
Yeah, Andy, again, we're talking about all these. What do you look at on the resume with Nebraska? 5-9 in quad one. They got 1 quad 2 loss, but they got 2 quad 3 losses, right? Home to USC, home to Minnesota. So that loss this weekend is really bad for them. They've dropped to 57th in the net. As for SMU, if we're talking about Xavier and North Carolina as each having 1 quad 1 win and that being a disqualifier, well, the Mustangs got a big goose egg. 0 quad 1 wins. They're 0-5. They're 5-3. So they got 3 quad 2 losses, and they don't have any losses outside of that. And so it's just it's so hard to know what you make of these teams.
Well, flipping from talking about the bubble to talking about the very top of the NCAA tournament picture, Auburn and Duke really have 2 of the 4 1 seeds pretty much locked up at this point. But we're going to talk about who would join them if the NCAA tournament started today. Which 2 teams would join them as number 1 seeds? We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, folks, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on all of it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip, or if you just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay right in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And it's great because when you win, you get paid instantly. Big Monday coming up. Houston, 10.5-point favorites at home over Kansas. We're going to talk about that game more to close out the show. But right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Isaac, closing out the show here, big picture conversation, looking at the #1 seed battle. Because for so much of the season, it just felt pretty much locked up for Auburn and Duke, the two teams with the National Player of the Year top candidates in Janai Broome and Cooper Flagg, two teams that are dominating their respective conferences, albeit a significant difference between the depth of the SEC and the depth of the ACC. But I don't think there's anybody really questioning that those two teams are locked in, straight up, put it in pen. They are going to be number one seeds when the Selection Sunday Committee rolls out the bracket in a couple of weeks. But the interesting battle will be which two teams join them, because right now there's pretty clearly a top six in college basketball. They're the top six teams at KenPom. They're the teams everybody's kind of talking about being in this mix. This is with all due respect to St. John's and a couple other teams that are kind of just on the outside of this conversation. But to me, it feels like there's four teams vying for those final two spots. And that would be three teams out of the SEC in Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee, and then Big 12 winner Houston, who has just continued to absolutely roll through a very, very good conference. And we obviously had the Alabama-Tennessee game, which gave us a nice data point as Meshack hits that incredibly clutch shot for the Vols in that game. But right now we're at a position where I'm very confident that the other two number one seeds are going to be among these four teams, but I'm not sure which ones it's going to be. And I think it's going to be fun to kind of take a look at who we think deserves those spots.
Andy, it's funny. As you're talking, I'm just looking at some of the net stuff. I don't have their team sheets pulled up. I'll do that in a second. But what's interesting to me, obviously Auburn is blitzing the entire country, dude. They've got 16 quad one wins. But when you look at that alone, it's like, I've been like, I think Houston might slide into that number 3 overall. But they've only got 7 quad one wins. All for none of these. Here's the thing. None of these 6 teams have a single loss outside quad one.
Yeah.
Alabama has the most losses, but they in Tennessee have the second most quad one wins with 10 each. I'm trying to scroll down quickly. I don't think those are the only 3 teams in America with double digit quad one wins. Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama. Obviously that's a function of playing in the SEC.
Sure.
But then you look at other stuff like Alabama. I'm feeling like they're on the outside looking in right now, in part because they choked away. I thought they should have beaten Tennessee. These dudes have only played 2 quad 4 games all season long, Andy.
Yeah, I know.
That is insane to me what they've done with that. And so it's almost a similar thing to what I was talking about with the bubble conversation. If you're the selection committee, what is it that you're going to value to make this determination? And I think that some of that is still ahead of us, Andy. And what I mean by that is, can Houston double dip on Big 12 regular season and tournament?
Right.
That would clearly be a leg up on Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama, unless one of them does it, right? Clearly a leg up because the Auburn's got the regular season already locked up. It's those kind of things. How does Alabama navigate? They've already lost the first, but now they have a shot at both Florida and Auburn this week, number 3 and 1 in the nation ahead of today's new AP poll. So, Andy, I think if I was saying it right now today, I think I would go Houston and either Tennessee or Alabama, and maybe give the edge to Tennessee since they just won this head-to-head matchup. And then just have Bama as the first 2 and Florida as the second 2. I think that's where I'd be at right now.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And it's just crazy to be, it's really interesting to me. And it kind of depends how the committee really looks at the early season struggles that Houston had. Like they struggled in their non-conference, but absolutely just ran through their conference with no problems whatsoever, which was absolutely insane to see them be able to do that. They're 7-4 in quad one games. Florida has the worst record. They're 6-4 in quad one games. It's not a bad record, mind you. It just happens to be the worst out of these teams. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think I'm with you. I think Houston does get one of them. I mean, they have 4 losses all season long. All of them, again, quad one losses, like we said. Florida's 6-4, Houston's 7-4. Tennessee and Bama have more of the quad one wins, obviously, as we said. But like again, Kentucky has 9 quad one wins, but they also have 9 quad one losses. So like just looking at quad one wins is not the way to do it. I mean, I think Oregon has like a bunch of quad one wins this year, and they're 8-6 in quad one games. That's great, but like they're not, that's not the only metric you want to use here. So I'm very interested. I don't think that like road record is something that gets taken into account, but it is notable that Houston is 9-0 on the road. They have not lost a true road game this season, whereas Florida's 6-3, Tennessee's 6-4, Alabama's 8-3. Again, the road opponents that they're playing in the SEC are great, but Houston's won some very, very good road games this year as well. So I think if it was me, I would go Auburn, Duke, Houston, Tennessee. If the season ended right now, with, again, Florida and Bama being those top two seeds. But like we said, these teams are all playing each other still in the SEC and might play each other again in the SEC tournaments. There's still lots of opportunities for things to change.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, do you know how many other teams in Division I out of the 363 other non-Houston teams are undefeated on the road?
How many?
Zero.
So I figured it could be many.
I'm not saying that's not a thing, but it's like, man, that's something impressive. And I know you don't play any Big 12 tournament games or any NCAA tournament games on the road,
right?
But it ain't at home. I'll tell you that. And that to me is something. Andy, yeah. So folks, we're curious your thoughts. Are we off? Are you with us? What are we doing, Andy? We need to put a poll up about this on YouTube and the Twitter machines and see what the good people are thinking. Big Monday, last one of the season coming up tonight, because next Monday we will be neck deep in conference tournaments. Kicking this off is Wake Forest at number 2 Duke, 7 p.m. on ESPN. FanDuel has it Duke minus 20.5 points. Look, Andy, Wake is done, right? We're fully in on that.
Yes. I think they've done enough damage to themselves to be out right now.
And good grief, almost lost again this weekend. Andy. They have I don't know. Anyway, they could still though play spoiler. That's their role in this thing. And of course, they got a shot in the ACC tournament. But we haven't seen Malik Brown in a while for Duke. We haven't seen Tyrese Proctor, as assumed, did not play on Saturday. We'll wait to see if he's ready to go today. If I'm Duke, I'm holding him out at least until North Carolina next Saturday. And Cooper Flagg got poked in the eye on Saturday. How is he? So, Andy, those could all be factors in this thing. Can Hunter Salas have a big hurrah in his last big Monday here? Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see how motivated Wake comes out. Certainly, if Duke's not fully healthy, there's a chance. There's a chance here, but yeah, I think that the Duke's still going to find a way to get a W here. Wake Forest is just really spiraling at this point, and I have a hard time seeing them rally the ships in a way to get a W here. But I think it's the least interesting of the two games here. I think everybody would have expected that this other game would be a ranked game, but Kansas, as we've talked about, no longer ranked in the top 25, but they're going on the road to Houston to take on the Cougs, number 4 for Kelvin Sampson's team. This game, again, 9 p.m. on ESPN after the Wake Forest Duke game. FanDuel favoring Houston by just 10.5.
That's it.
Again, it's a seems like kind of a small margin, but Houston, they tend to either absolutely decimate teams and beat them by 35, but they're also very comfortable playing and winning close games. And I think Kansas certainly has a chance to keep this thing close. I think they have a chance to pick up a massive W if they bring everything together, if Hunter Dickinson has a monster game. But this Kansas team really struggling right now. They had some off the court issues with Zeke Mayo mentioning that some of the conversations that he was hearing on social media after their recent game, and it was just seems like things are just not going all that well for Kansas. I know they kind of rallied around him, but this is a program that, they're 10-8 in the Big 12. A win here puts them in a position where they can comfortably finish 500 at least in conference play. If they don't win this game, they may not be finishing 500 in the league, which is just crazy to see. They only have 19 wins right now with 2 games to go, and then getting into the Big 12 tournament, they'll probably get to 20. I don't think they're going to go winless for the rest of the year, but it's worth pointing out this team hasn't finished under 20 wins since 1989. Like the fact that they're even in that conversation is a testament to how much this program has struggled. And as we said this stat a few weeks ago with Kansas, they're going to finish outside the top 3 in back-to-back years in the Big 12. That hasn't happened since, what was it, 1983? Was that when it was?
82 and 83 were those seasons, yeah.
82 and 83. And this is a team for Kansas. They're at Houston in this game, and then they close at home against Arizona. Obviously, they're at home, but that's a really tough game. So Kansas got some work to do to put themselves at least feeling more comfortable about the end of the season and maybe carrying a little momentum into the Big 12 tournament. But woof, it's been a rough go for Bill Self's team.
It's crazy to think that if they drop both these games, they would finish Big 12 play 500, Andy, like you were saying. That is mind-boggling to me. I expect them to get I don't expect them to get Anyway, one other game of note tonight, UCLA at Northwestern, 9 Eastern on FS1, UCLA by 2.5 at FanDuel. Andy, some of the conference tournaments are getting underway this week. ASUN started yesterday after you and I actually literally like 5 minutes from right now is the tip of those. And then it will be underway again today. That's the only one going today, Monday, and then a couple others open up on Tuesday. That means, baby, we are coming down to it. Less than the length of Wimbledon before we get the bracket, Andy, and I cannot wait. Gang, thanks so much for being with us today. If you've not subscribed to the show on video and audio, make sure you do that now so you don't miss a single second of Locked On College Basketball. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord family, baby, you are missing out. Come on and join us. Links in the show notes. Absolutely free to join. As always, apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. So sorry about Jackson Robinson being done for the season. And shouts to Mick Bruins. Good luck tonight in Chicago. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.